Hello guys, today we'll be covering a 2012 fantasy horror film called Painless. All the relevant links and information for the film will be in the description down below. Now let's get right into the movie. The film takes place in Catalonia and follows two distinct storylines. One is set in the 1930s to the 1960s, and another in the present day. Each story's events are presented simultaneously, eventually blending into a single narrative. In 1931, an unknown neurological disorder causes painlessness in a bunch of kids. Because they can't feel the physical pain, they begin to harm themselves by burning, wounding, and even eating their own flesh. The villagers are terrified, and the authorities decide to exclude the children from society because they can be dangerous to others and themselves as well. They're sent to the Canfranc asylum, where they're confined in separate cells and cared for. Dr. Carcedo is in charge of the place and believes there's no other option but to lock the kids up. Among those children, Benigno and Inez stand out, whose friendship sustains them during their captivity. They're kept in rooms next to each other, cells number 16 and 17. Benigno is an intelligent child, but he's also prone to violent outbursts. One day, he hides a spoon and digs a hole in the wall through which he and Inez communicate. The nurse who looks after Benigno is a kind woman. She treats the kid gently. One day, he sees her tears and asks what that is. She tells him about the tears and the emotions of happiness and pain. In the hope of finding a cure for the children, she writes a letter to Dr. Hubert Holzmann, who's in Germany, despite Dr. Carcedo's indifference. Soon enough, Dr. Holzmann arrives in the asylum and offers to assist Dr. Carcedo in rehabilitating the children. He begins by conducting tests to teach them empathy and to make them understand pain. He's against nurses mistreating and physically abusing the children. He even stops Dr. Carcedo from hitting them. One day, Dr. Holzmann brings in some puppies to the asylum. The kids are excited to see the pups and pet them. He asks them to find a puppy with a tumor in the kidney among them. Inez is able to find the right puppy. Then he asks who can remove its kidney without harming the puppy, which has not been anesthetized. Benigno volunteers and successfully removes the kidney and impresses the doctor. He asks if he can keep the puppy, but Dr. Carcedo sternly denies it and tells him to go back to his cell. The doctors, Holzmann and Carcedo, have an argument about the children. Holzmann views Benigno as exceptional, whereas Carcedo regards the child as a nuisance. Despite Dr. Carcedo's refusal, Benigno hides and brings the puppy inside his cell. He even lets Inez pet it through the hole. As the puppy barks, two nurses rush into Benigno's cell, one of whom slaps him and forcibly takes the puppy away from him. Benigno, enraged, slashes her leg with a spoon. Furious, Dr. Carcedo declares that Benigno is no longer permitted to leave cell number 17. The building is infiltrated by the Reds in 1936 as the Spanish Civil War erupts. They want to keep ammunition in the cells. Dr. Carcedo insists that the children be kept separated, but they threaten him with guns. Dr. Holzmann steps in to explain that the children are suffering from a serious, highly contagious illness and that they should leave them alone. Nonetheless, they make the place their hideout. The nationalists besiege the asylum and detain everyone. They identify the Reds and shoot them. They also kill Dr. Carcedo for hiding the Reds under the building, while letting Dr. Holzmann, the nurses, and the children go. 1939. The war is still going on, causing the scarcity of food and medicine. Dr. Holzmann decides to inject some drugs and let the children die. Witnessing Inez's death through the hole, Benigno decides to kill the doctor. When the doctor comes into his cell, he furiously stabs him with the glass of the syringe. Magdalena, the nurse, closes the door when she sees him approaching her with bloody hands. She then hands the key to the military after observing his craziness. 1940. As the armed forces enter cell 17, they spot a skeleton hanging by the window-like hole in the wall from where the light gets in. They also find Benigno, who has scars all over his body and has stopped speaking entirely. They name him Burkano, which means rebirth. 1944. The asylum has been converted into a prison, and Burkano, who has now become a prolific torturer, is still held in cell 17. Two members of the Special Air Service are captured and horrifyingly tortured by Burkano, while the confessor asks them about their base. One of the men manages to escape, as revealed later in the story. 1963. A woman is brought to Burkano's cell. When they bring her in, she's humming a song and refuses to answer the questions. Burkano is supposed to torture the woman, but when he sees her crying, he cuts the tie in her hand and releases her instead. He even hands her the knife. She tries to kill him but is unable to do so. Later on, they fall in love and even conceive a child in the prison. 1964. The confessor goes into the cell to kill the prisoner woman, but Burkano intervenes. Because it appears that she's pregnant, the confessor makes a deal. He asks that they give him the child in exchange for him leaving them alone. After the baby is born, he takes the baby and leaves the two in the cell. Nobody knows what happened to Burkano and the woman after that. In the present day, David Martel, a neurosurgeon, and his 6-month pregnant wife get into a car accident. After some time, David awakens in the hospital and discovers that his wife did not survive the crash, but the doctors were able to save the baby. To make matters worse, he discovers that he has a rare type of cancer that can only be cured by a bone marrow transplant. Initially, he's hesitant about the transplant because the bone marrow must be taken from one of his parents who are both old. However, his friend Judith, who's also a doctor, persuades him to do so because he now has a child for whom he must live. After pondering for a while, David goes to see his parents and asks them to save him, but his father bluntly refuses to. Later, his mother visits him in the hospital and reveals that they're not able to help him with his treatment because they're not his biological parents. She tells him about her losing a baby and later having adopted him. His father had brought him from jail where he worked there as a police. She doesn't know much about his real parents, but she does know that his biological mother was imprisoned in Canfranc in the 1960s. From there, David sets out to find his real parents. He visits the Canfranc asylum, which is ruined during the Spanish Civil War and World War II. He finds a card at the door of cell 17 that belongs to CNT and pays a visit to the leader of the association. The man tells David about his brother Jose, who was imprisoned in cell 17 and was the only person to be thrown out alive. Next, David returns to see his father and tells him about Jose, whom he's going to meet the next day. His father is disturbed to learn that Jose is still alive. He refuses to discuss the past and tries to discourage the son from seeking the truth because it will only make him sad. He informs him that the person he's looking for is no longer alive and that it's best to forget the past. However, because he's determined about discovering the truth, David becomes enraged at his father for preventing him from it and leaves, despite his mother's pleas to stay. After a few days, David goes to see Jose. He inquires about his mother with him, who was also imprisoned in Canfranc in the 1960s. In response, Jose mentions Burkano, who interrogated people by torturing them. He was strange and unaware of the pain. Jose reveals that he crawled out of the hole once he became small enough after most of his flesh was cut off. Then David shows him a photo of someone and asks if he's seen him. Jose is agitated seeing it and screams, "The confessor!" The confessor, the man in the photograph, is later revealed to be his father who adopted him. Distraught to learn about Burkano and his brutality, David calls his father and tells him he'll come to see him and demands the truth no matter what. However, when he arrives at his parents' house, he discovers that the door is locked, so he enters through a window. He's looking for his parents when he hears a recording of a woman singing and sobbing. After the tape ends, he goes upstairs where he finds his mother dead in the bathroom and his father sitting on a chair. He admits to loving David as if he were his own child, even though he has his real father's terrifying eyes. And shortly after, the father shoots himself in front of the son without revealing the truth. Regardless, David returns to the Canfranc building, determined that his real parents still live there. He breaks into cell 17 and discovers a hole in the floor that leads to an underground compartment. He crawls through it until he reaches the chamber. The chamber is dark and creepy, and as he climbs up the stairs, he hears the same recording he heard before at his parents' house. He picks up the burning lighter near the cassette player and finds a dead woman, supposedly his mother, lying nearby. As he observes the place, a strange man with scars all over his body grabs David's shoulder from behind, and as he prepares to kill him, he stops, seeing the tears. They recognize each other in silence. The lighter's fallen on the floor when David was startled by the attack, and the room is on fire. Burkano steps into the flames, picks up the body's woman, and the film ends with the father and son looking into each other's eyes.